Hello, welcome to Westeros Org. Today's video. This one should be a short one, but it's one that a lot of people were wondering about because in the Kingsguard video I mentioned something in passing about I had a theory about Vidanes and Dawn and the office of the Sword of the Morning, and a lot of people were kind of wondering what I was getting at. I never touched on it, so I'll explain it here. This is a theory of mine, and others have had it as well. I don't know who originated it. I know I've held it for many years now, but I don't know where the origin is. But, okay, what do we know about Vidanes and the Sword of the Morning and Dawn? Vidanes. We have Gerald Dane saying that Vidanes have been killing Oakhearts, and the Oakhearts have been killing Danes for 10,000 years from the dawn of days. Now 10,000, that is a figure that is a common number for exaggerating. It's not an exact figure, it's a grossly rounded figure, especially for a long time. Thousands of years for sure. It doesn't matter that George is throwing in some things that are suggesting that the history does not go as far back as some people think. But it may not actually be 8,000 years, it may be shorter. But the history of Westeros is certainly thousands of years old, without question. So basically from the earliest time in which, and the name Dane being a very short and being kind of very directly connected to day, is very much a first man name. So they are first men. They're from the mountain region where we're told what the first men and the Andals came from. And they have the sword, Dawn, which is not Valyrian steel. It is forged from the heart of a falling star, so says the Ned Stark. Pale. Valyrian steel is dark. Dawn is very pale. Pale as milk glass, alive with light is a description. It's a two-handed greatsword, you know, like ice and Heartsbane. It is also, you know, I mean, George has said that if Dane in his prime had Dawn versus Barristan in his prime versus a regular sword, he would bet pretty much Dane is the winner of that fight. If Dane has a regular sword, it's a toss-up. So it's like Valyrian steel in that it's, you know, it doesn't need sharpening, and its edge is so fine that it can cut through steel as if it were much weaker. So it's a great equalizer. So it's a great weapon. But it's not Valyrian steel because it's not. It seems to have been made in some time before most of the Valyrian steel entered Westeros. Almost all the Valyrian steel that we know of comes around into Westeros from about 400 to 500 years ago. I have theories this connects to the Doom, but Targaryens having it and using it to buy off people when they settled in Dragonstone and so on. But pretty much every weapon is described from being in that period, whereas Dawn is, according to George, well, a couple thousand years old, and beyond that it gets kind of misty and confused. And that particular statement comes some years into the series when he's finally started laying in the idea that the history is not necessarily as straightforward as it's first presented as in the first novel. In the first novel, the history is kind of, there's no question about 8,000 years. There's no question. I mean, it's only really in A Feast for Crows where you only in A Feast for Crows where you really start getting the suggestion that the history is more complicated. I don't quite know what's going on there, but might be something worth discussing as well. In any case, to get back to Dawn and the Danes. And now the other thing we know about the Danes is, in relation to Dawn, is that the sword is only ever wielded by a knight or a member of the family who is named Sword of the Morning. It is an office. It is not a cool by name. It is the title of the guy who is found worthy to wield the sword. I don't think it's the sort of thing where the sword is this magic sword, and if you're not worthy, you know, it's not like Mjolnir and Thor. It's like you can't pick it up or anything. Anyone can use it, but for whatever reasons, the Danes have this notion that it's not the Lord who carries it. It's a knight or a member of the family who is worthy of carrying it, who uses it. And it's given to them, and they use it. We know of another one, Ulrich Dane, who is also the Sword of the Morning. Don't know anything else about him, really. Other than, you know, Sword of the Morning seems to be equivalent of Great Knight, great warrior, famous person. So what does this all mean together? Well, I've had this theory, and again others have had, that what if the office is there because Dawn itself is important? Dawn is not just any other fancy, super sharp, ancient sword. What if it's a magical weapon that has some sort of role, some sort of importance? And the other thing we have about the Danes is that they have violet eyes. Now George says this is not like the. It's not like it's unknown for people to have violet eyes in our own world. Elizabeth Taylor is the example he used. And Elizabeth Taylor was dark-haired, and we've learned that House Dayne was dark-haired, but they had the violet eyes. Violet being generally a kind of blue eye that has a certain quality to it that makes it look purple in certain lights, at least. And I thought about this, and George, he was asked, are we related to Targaryens? He said, no, as far as he knows, there's no Targaryen blood. But it doesn't preclude there being something other than Targaryen blood, like Valyrian blood, or maybe Proto-Valyrian blood. Because the theory is that Dawn is Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes, the sword of Azor Ahai. Now, you say, well, doesn't Stannis have Lightbringer? No, he doesn't. Melisandre tells him he has it, but it's basically a glamour. As we learn, she knows how to cast glamours. She's basically gotten a regular sword, and she's put a little rainbow glamour around it to make it look magical. But as Stannis said, that sword did him no more good than any other sword when it came to the Blackwater, the Battle of the Blackwater. It's regular steel. Maester Aemon asks Samwell to describe it to him, what it was like when he had Stannis unsheath it. And Samwell described the colors, and then Aemon afterward tells Sam, there was no heat, it wasn't hot. The red sword of heroes is supposed to be burning hot. Basically, it's red because it's burning hot. That's what the legend says. And Aemon seems to believe that if it was a real Lightbringer, that's what it would do. It would cast heat. So, well, Dawn isn't burning hot. Well, maybe not now. Maybe not because Azor Ahai Reborn hasn't claimed it yet, or isn't around for it to come alive with heat. So my idea is basically that the Danes are custodians of Lightbringer. They're waiting for, and they've forgotten a lot of this, but they're keeping this office and they're keeping it sort of sacred. They're waiting for Azor Ahai to come again to reclaim his sword. Possibly the Sword of the Morning will be the person. Maybe they know that the future, when he comes back, he's not going to be able to wield it. Maybe because he'll be Daenerys. And the Sword of the Morning will be the sort of wielder for this person, a champion for Azor Ahai. Does it fit? It fits in a lot of ways. I mean, the Violet Eyes. We have the story of the last hero, and who he is a mystery. Well, what if Azor Ahai, who's supposed to have come around at a time of great darkness, and he had to, where darkness covered the world. It sounds a bit like the Long Night. And he forged this sword. A hero must have a hero's sword, and we have the whole story of the sacrifice of Nissa. What if he takes the sword and he goes to Westeros to fight? Right? He goes to fight, and Azor Ahai is basically the guy who helps bring an end to the Long Night. And he leaves the sword with a companion, or perhaps he leaves the sword to a descendant. Maybe he had a relations with some woman in Westeros, and she had a son, and he said, this son will, from his line will come men who will carry this sword till the day comes when the Long Night comes back and I return. It's all very speculative, but I think there's probably something to it. I think that Dawn was Lightbringer. It may not come again, it may not be used again, but of course you have the other thing, which is the interesting little prophecy from Quaife to Dany about to touch the light must pass beneath the shadow, and you think, well, now she was thinking a shy, that doesn't seem to be it. Now I'm thinking that when the shadow of Drogon came over her, the idea being basically it led her back to the path forward, but to touch the light makes me think Lightbringer. Melisandre's prophecy says that, you know, the Red Sword of Heroes will be needed for Azor Ahai when he comes back. Of course, in our prophecy video, we discussed the fact that Jon could be Azor Ahai, which is interesting. I mean, Jon probably was collected by Ned when he visited Starfall. There's a connection there. I don't buy the idea that Jon is Ashara Dayne's son, but just that vague connection that Dawn was there at his birth in the hands of Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, but he was in Starfall. If there is a magical quality for it to kind of indicate who the next Sword of the Morning is, for all we know, there is this weird thing that the reason it's sitting around in Starfall is it's waiting for Jon Snow to show up, or for someone to take it to Jon. So, yeah, that's my theory anyways. There's so many pieces that go together that it's a little convoluted, but basically that Dawn was Azor Ahai's sword. It's now been carried by the Danes for thousands of years, waiting for the occasion that Azor Ahai comes back to fight the new threat of the others, or the Long Night again. Very cool stuff. I kind of wish we would see Starfall and meet more of the Danes and see more of them in time, but doesn't seem very likely to happen. Or maybe it will happen. But yeah, that's my big theory, and again, that of others, I can't take credit for it solely, but that's my view.